The auctioneer's gavel slammed down again, echoing across the dusty town square. "Sold!" he shouted, eyes flicking over the restless crowd. A ripple of murmurs followed as men nudged each other, whispering about the latest acquisition. In the center of the chaos stood a girl, her hair tangled, her eyes sharp as a hawk's, and her stance defiant. No man had been able to tame her. They had all tried and failed. Yet, amidst the laughter and bets of the townsfolk, one man remained silent, tall, broad-shouldered, with a calmness that seemed unshakable. Jackson Hawley, a rancher known for his work ethic and quiet strength, studied her. Something in her fire, the untamed spirit that others saw as a curse, drew him in. He raised his hand and placed his bid. Murmurs turned into shocked gasps. "He'll never handle her," someone muttered. When the gavel finally hit the wood, Jackson had bought her. Not out of pity, not out of bravado, but because he saw beyond the wildness, the strength, the courage, the heart. The girl, whose name was Lila, glared at him with suspicion and fury. "You don't get it," she spat, stepping back. I'm not one of your animals." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly, either from anger or fear. Jackson couldn't tell. "I know," he said calmly, his deep voice steady and unyielding. "I don't want you to be one of my animals. I want you to be yourself. But you're coming with me." She laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and raw. "Coming with you? I'm not going anywhere with anyone." Jackson didn't argue. Instead, he let his silence do the work, and slowly, as the crowd's laughter faded, she realized there was no room for theatrics here. No one else had bought her. He had. And for the first time, no one tried to force her into submission. The ride to the ranch was tense. Layla's hands gripped the sides of the wagon, eyes darting at every shadow, every movement outside the window. Jackson drove slowly, letting the rhythm of the horses calm her, never pressuring, never speaking too much. When they finally arrived at the sprawling ranch, she hesitated, taking in the wide-open fields, the horses grazing, and the sturdy buildings. "You'll have your own room," Jackson said, opening the door. "You can decide when you want to help with the work. But I expect honesty and respect, nothing more." Lila studied him, suspicious. This was different. No yelling, no threats, no controlling hands. Just boundaries, and somehow that was even harder for her to handle than cruelty had ever been. Days passed, and Lila's defiance remained, though cracks appeared in the walls she had built. She resisted chores at first, mocking the other ranch hands and testing Jackson's patience. But she couldn't deny the beauty of the land, the rhythm of the work, and the subtle respect in Jackson's eyes. He noticed her skill with animals, the way she calmed a skittish horse or found the lost calf faster than any man on the ranch. Jackson never praised her outright, never pushed her, but she felt it in the way he watched her, the way he moved through the ranch with a quiet confidence, as if he already knew she was capable of anything. And somewhere deep inside, Lila felt a shift, something dangerous, something she had never felt before. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't hate. It was curiosity, and perhaps, just perhaps, the beginnings of trust. For the first time in her life, the wild girl realized that being untamed didn't mean being alone. The first week on the ranch tested Lila in ways she had never imagined. Every sunrise brought new chores, new animals to manage, and the endless expanse of land that seemed to stretch forever. She was used to chaos, to running wild with no rules, but here the rhythm of work demanded focus and discipline. Jackson watched silently from the porch, arms crossed, as she struggled with the stubborn mule that refused to budge. "Hey," Jackson called when she finally stepped back, frustrated. "The mule doesn't bite, but it knows when you're nervous. Calm yourself first." Lila glared at him. "And I suppose you think I should just whisper sweet words and it'll obey?" Jackson smirked, but didn't move closer. Not sweet words, respect, confidence. You've got it, you just have to show it, she huffed, muttering under her breath, but she tried again. This time, she softened her grip, spoke in low tones, and the mule finally moved. She looked up at Jackson, astonished, and he simply nodded once approvingly before turning back to his own tasks. No fanfare, no praise, just acknowledgement. It was different from anyone else she had ever known, and strangely, it made her heart race. That evening, the wind shifted, bringing a storm rolling across the horizon. Dark clouds swallowed the sun, and the first rumbles of thunder shook the air. Jackson walked over to her as she secured the last of the animals in the barn. "Storm's coming fast. You'll need to stay inside tonight." Lila glanced at him, frowning. "Inside? That's boring." "It's safe," he replied simply, his eyes scanning the sky. "You'll have plenty of time for adventure tomorrow." Before she could argue, the rain started light at first, then pounding the wooden roof of the barn. Thunder rolled like distant cannons, and lightning split the sky. The animals grew restless, panicking in their stalls. Lila's instincts kicked in. She ran between stalls, calming horses, securing gates, whispering in the same sharp, commanding tone she had always used, but now she wasn't alone. Jackson joined her, steadying a panicked Mare, guiding her hands when necessary. "See?" he said as they worked side by side. "You're not wild, you're capable." Lila's chest tightened, not from exhaustion, but from the strange flutter of pride and something else she couldn't name. He wasn't telling her what to do. He was showing her she could do it herself. And she liked it. Hours later, drenched and muddy, they finally stood outside the barn, watching the storm rage across the fields. The sun was gone, replaced by the violent gray of clouds and the flash of lightning. She turned to him, voice softer than usual. You don't boss me around." "Why?" Jackson met her gaze, calm and unwavering. "Because you don't need me to. You're strong. I just need you to see it." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the rhythm of rain. And for the first time, Lila didn't feel the need to fight him, to lash out or hide behind anger. Instead, she felt something unexpected trust. Something dangerous stirred in her chest, a feeling she had never allowed herself to entertain. He saw her for what she truly was, not the wild girl the world whispered about. And with that, for the first time, Lila realized that maybe being untamed didn't mean being alone or unloved. The storm passed, leaving the ranch slick and glistening under the emerging moonlight. Jackson clapped his hands together, brushing mud from his pants. "Come inside. Hot food, warm fire. You've earned it." Lila followed him reluctantly, heart pounding not from the storm, but from the realization that her life here, unpredictable as it was, might just be the place where her heart could finally rest. The morning air was crisp and sharp, carrying the scent of wet earth and fresh hay from last night's storm. Lila awoke to the soft clatter of hooves and the distant call of cattle. She stretched, muscles sore from yesterday's chaos, and glanced out the window. Jackson was already at the barn, moving with that effortless command over the animals that she both admired and envied. She slipped on her boots and jacket, determined not to let him see her fatigue. Today, she would prove herself not just as a worker on the ranch, but as someone capable of surviving in this world he had invited her into dot by mid-morning. She had completed most of her chores, moving from horses to cows with a steady rhythm. Jackson watched from a distance, silent but attentive, as she handled a particularly stubborn steer. Layla caught his eyes once and felt that familiar flutter in her chest. She shook it off, returning her focus to the animal. It was then that the alarm sounded, the shrill, frantic barking of the ranch dog. Layla froze, ears straining. Something wasn't right. The dog ran ahead, snarling and growling, teeth bared, hair bristling. Jackson was already moving toward her, voice sharp. "Stay close." They rounded a corner and saw the threat. A pack of wild coyotes had ventured too close to the herd, drawn by the storm and hunger. Their eyes glinted in the sunlight, teeth flashing, ready to strike. The cattle panicked, hooves pounding the soft earth as they tried to scatter. Instinct took over. Lila grabbed a sturdy rope, looping it around a post to create a barrier, while Jackson directed the animals back into the pen. She moved with surprising grace, keeping her fear in check, even as one bold coyote lunged too close. With a swift kick and a sharp shout, she drove it away. Heart-hammering, Jackson reached her side, steadying her with a hand on her shoulder. "You've got courage," he said quietly, almost as if admitting something to himself. "And quick thinking. I knew you weren't just a wild girl. I just didn't know you had this." Lila's breath caught. He wasn't lecturing her. He wasn't telling her she couldn't do it. He was noticing, acknowledging her strength. It was a sensation both thrilling and terrifying. The last of the coyotes scattered, and silence fell over the ranch, broken only by the snorts of the animals settling down. Lila wiped sweat and mud from her brow, her chest heaving. Jackson studied her, eyes soft now, a rare, warm expression crossing his rugged features. "You saved more than the herd," he said, voice low. "You saved me from underestimating you." She laughed, a short, breathless sound, part relief, part pride. "I guess I'm not as untamable as everyone thinks." "No," Jackson said firmly. "You're untamable in the right ways, and that's what makes you extraordinary." For a moment, they stood together, the wind tugging at their hair, the ranch quiet around them. Lila felt a connection she hadn't anticipated, a bond forged not by control or fear, but by trust and mutual respect. The realization settled deep in her chest. She didn't have to be anyone's property, nor did she have to run from the world to remain free. Jackson stepped closer, the scent of leather and earth surrounding him. "You belong here, Lila, not because you're tamed, but because this place, this life, needs someone like you." Her eyes met his, wide and searching, and for the first time, she let herself consider something she had never dared to, being wanted. Not for submission, not for charm, not for obedience, but for who she truly was. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the fields, Lila felt the first sparks of something dangerous, something thrilling, trust, respect, and maybe, just maybe, the beginnings of love. For the first time, the wild girl realized that stepping into his world didn't mean losing herself, it meant finding someone who could match her fire, not dim it. The quiet of the ranch that evening was deceptive. The storm from earlier in the week had left pools of water in low spots, and the air still smelled of wet earth and burned wood from the lightning that had struck nearby trees. Jackson moved about the property, checking fences and animals, while Lila followed close behind, still riding the adrenaline from the coyote encounter. "You handled yourself well today," Jackson said casually as they rounded the barn. "Not many could have done that," Lila shrugged, trying to hide the small smile tugging at her lips. "I'm not sure anyone could have handled that," she muttered, thinking of the snarling coyotes and the pounding hooves of terrified cattle. Jackson's gaze lingered on her, something unspoken in his eyes. "I've seen plenty of wild girls, Lila," he said slowly, "but none with the courage you have. And none who would actually face danger instead of running from it." She stiffened slightly. His words were warm, but they cut straight through her defenses. Most men had tried to control her, scare her, or make her feel small. Jackson noticed her, saw her strength, respected it. That was a different kind of danger, one that made her pulse quicken. Before she could respond, a distant shout carried across the fields. Lila's head snapped toward the sound. A group of men, rough and armed, had appeared near the western fence. Their intentions were unclear, but their eyes were fixed on the herd. Jackson immediately moved toward the barn to gather supplies and secure the animals. "Stay behind me," he shouted, urgency threading his usually calm voice. Lila didn't hesitate. "I'm not staying behind," she yelled back, grabbing a rope and heading toward the herd. Her heart pounded with fear, but also with that same thrill that had drawn Jackson to her, the need to act, to protect, to survive. The men approached, clearly planning to steal cattle, their movements bold. Jackson intercepted them, towering and unflinching. "This is private property. Leave now, or you'll answer to me," he warned. They laughed, underestimating him and her. Lila, hard hammering, noticed a loose gate and pushed a calf through it, luring it toward safety. She shouted, flinging herself between one of the thieves and the animals, brandishing the rope like a weapon. Her movements were instinctive, powerful, and fearless. Jackson's eyes widened, not with surprise, but with admiration. She was more than fire, she was courage in motion. Together, they drove the intruders back toward the road, Jackson's strength and her quick thinking forming an unstoppable team. By the time the men fled, the herd was secure and the ranch stood unscathed. Lila leaned against the fence, chest heaving, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Jackson approached, placing a hand on her shoulder, not in ownership, but in solidarity. "You're incredible," he said softly. "I knew you were strong, but I didn't know you'd fight like that." For the first time, Lila allowed herself to let her guard down completely. She laughed, short and breathless, the tension melting into relief. "And you didn't think I had it in me?" Jackson's eyes softened, and for a moment, the world shrank to just the two of them. "I never doubted you," he said. "I just wanted you to see it for yourself." The night fell cool and quiet, with stars scattered across the sky. Lila felt the warmth of pride, of belonging, and of something far more dangerous: affection. Jackson had shown her that she didn't need to be tamed to be valued. And now, after the fight and the fear, she realized she didn't want to be dod as they walked back toward the house, side by side. Lila felt the first true spark of trust and the undeniable pull of her heart toward him. She wasn't just surviving the ranch anymore. She was starting to live. The morning sun spilled golden light over the ranch, warming the dew-covered fields. Lila moved among the animals, her hands steady now, her confidence growing with each task. The storm and the thieves from the previous night had left a lingering tension, but also a strange sense of exhilaration. She had survived. She had protected the herd. And somehow, standing beside Jackson, she felt a surge of belonging she had never known. Jackson emerged from the house with coffee in hand, his boots crunching on the gravel. He stopped when he saw her tending a skittish horse, gently coaxing it forward. "You've got away with them," he said, voice low, almost like he was talking to himself. "You see what they need before they even know it." Lila looked up, meeting his gaze, and felt a strange heat in her chest. "I just pay attention," she said, shrugging. "They're easier to read than people, anyway." Jackson's lips curved in a faint smile. "Maybe, but you're learning to read people too." She rolled her eyes but didn't deny it. His steady presence, the way he observed without controlling, was teaching her more than she realized. And she liked it. More than she would admit. Later that afternoon, while repairing a fence along the western edge of the property, Jackson finally spoke again, breaking the quiet that had stretched between them. "Layla, why do you push everyone away?" The question hit her like a blow. She froze, hammer in hand, staring at him. I don't know what you mean," she muttered. Though her chest tightened, Jackson leaned against the fence, eyes soft but serious. "You've been through a lot. I can see it in the way you trust no one. But you didn't push me away today, did you?" Layla's heart skipped. She wanted to deny it, wanted to hide behind sarcasm or defiance, but the truth was undeniable. "No," she admitted quietly. I don't know why." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Because you're realizing that being strong doesn't mean you have to be alone. That it's okay to let someone see the real you. Even if it scares you." Her throat tightened. She had spent years hiding behind her wildness, convincing herself it was armor. But standing there, with the wind tugging at her hair and Jackson's steady gaze on her, she felt something shift. Armor was heavy. Fire was freeing. And trust could be even stronger. Before she could respond, a sudden cry broke the afternoon stillness. A young calf had slipped into a shallow creek nearby, its tiny legs thrashing in the rushing water. Without thinking, Layla sprinted toward it. Jackson followed immediately, calling her name, but she ignored the warning. The water was icy, the current stronger than she expected, and the calf struggled against it. She grabbed the animal, using all her strength to drag it to safety. Jackson reached her side just as she stumbled on the slippery bank, steadying her with a firm hand. "You've got a wild heart, Lila," he said, steadying her. "But it's also brave and kind. That's remarkable." Breathless and soaked, she looked up at him. For the first time, she didn't flinch, didn't turn away. His eyes were full of something she had never encountered before: admiration, respect, and a warmth that made her pulse quicken. "You think I'm remarkable?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. Jackson smiled, brushing mud from her sleeve. "I know you are, and I don't want to change you. Just let me be here with you." Her heart pounded as she realized the depth of what he was saying. For once, no one wanted to tame her. No one wanted to control her. He wanted to see her wildness, her fire, and still stand beside her. Lila swallowed hard, the realization settling deep in her chest. She had stepped onto this ranch thinking it was a place to survive. Now she understood it was a place to live, and perhaps to love. The following days passed in a rhythm that surprised Lila. Mornings were spent with the animals, afternoons repairing fences or mending tools, and evenings by the fire in the main house, watching the sunset bleed into the wide horizon. She began to notice subtle changes within herself, the tension in her shoulders easing, the constant need to fight for survival softening into curiosity, even trust. Jackson observed it all quietly, never forcing, never praising too much, letting her discover her strength in her own time. But his presence was constant, a grounding force she couldn't ignore. One afternoon, as they worked together rounding up cattle near the western hills, Lila stumbled over a hidden rock. She caught herself, heart racing, and looked up to see Jackson rushing to her side. "You okay?" he asked, his voice calm, but his eyes scanning her from head to toe. "I'm fine," she replied quickly, though a flush crept over her cheeks, not from the fall, but from the intensity of his gaze. He didn't let her brush it off. "You don't have to be so tough all the time. You can let someone see you falter, you know?" The words struck deeper than she expected. Most people had mocked her for her wildness, laughed at her mistakes, or ignored her pain. Jackson's words, they carried weight. They carried understanding. Later, while securing the herd, a shadow moved at the edge of the tree line. Layla tensed. "What was that?" she whispered, instincts alert. Jackson narrowed his eyes. "Stay close." A lone rider approached, dusty and sunburned, face partially hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. Jackson stepped in front of Lila, protective but calm. The rider stopped, raising a hand in greeting. "Evening, Jackson. We need to talk about the land," he said, voice wary. Lila felt a jolt of fear but also excitement. Danger was no stranger to her, yet facing it with Jackson by her side made it different. She didn't feel powerless. Jackson's posture shifted slightly, signaling her to stay calm. "We'll talk," he said, voice steady, "but leave the cattle out of it. The rider nodded cautiously, sensing the quiet authority Jackson carried. Lila watched, admiration and something else, something warmer filling her chest. He didn't just command respect. He inspired it. And she realized, painfully and thrillingly, that she had begun to care for him, not just as a protector, not just as a mentor, but as someone who had entered the guarded space of her heart without trying to take it over. That evening, after the visitor left, they walked back to the house together. Lila's mind replayed the moments of the day, the trust, the shared danger, the quiet understanding that had passed between them. She felt a pull toward Jackson, a pull she hadn't felt for anyone. Sitting by the fire, she stole glances at him. The way his eyes caught the flicker of flames, the ease in his posture, the quiet strength radiating from him, it was magnetic. She wanted to say something, to confess even a fraction of what she felt, but fear gripped her tongue. Jackson seemed to sense it anyway. He reached over, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've changed," he said softly, almost a whisper. "Not because I've changed you, but because you're starting to trust yourself. And maybe trust me." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. That word trust was heavier than anything she had carried in years. She nodded slightly, unable to speak. For the first time, Lila realized that being wild didn't mean being alone, and being untamed didn't mean being unloved. She had found someone who could match her fire, not extinguish it. And as she sat there, heart pounding and eyes meeting his, she understood that the journey ahead would be unpredictable, but with Jackson, she didn't want it any other way. The night settled over the ranch, quiet and comforting. Lila leaned back, letting herself feel the warmth of the fire, the strength beside her, and the undeniable stirrings of something she had long denied: love. The sun rose pale and golden over the ranch, casting long shadows across the fields. Lila awoke with a mix of anticipation and unease. The rhythm of ranch life was becoming familiar, yet each day brought its own challenges, physical, emotional, and now personal. Her heart betrayed her in ways she couldn't ignore, quickening at the sound of Jackson's voice or the simple brush of his hand when he passed by. That morning, Jackson had assigned her to the northern pasture with the younger horses. As she guided them along the fence line, she noticed a colt struggling to keep pace. Instinct took over. She slowed, coaxing it forward, her voice firm but gentle. She felt his eyes on her, and as always, the awareness made her cheeks warm. "You're good with them," Jackson said from a few feet away, his tone light but edged with meaning. "Better than I expected," Lila snorted, brushing mud from her boots. "I've survived worse than stubborn horses," he chuckled, the sound deep and comforting. "I'm sure you have. But it's not just surviving. It's the way you face it. The courage. The heart." She wanted to deny it, to turn away, but the words stayed lodged in her chest. Courage. Heart. They weren't compliments, not really. They were recognition. He wasn't seeing the wild girl everyone else feared. He was seeing her. The afternoon passed in relative calm until a distant shout broke the peaceful rhythm. Lila froze, scanning the hills. The sound was desperate, strained, a human voice calling for help. Jackson immediately stiffened. "That's near the creek," he muttered. "Stay close." They raced across the fields, hoofs pounding, hearts hammering. As they neared the creek, they saw a young boy struggling in the water, caught in a sudden current from yesterday's rain. Without hesitation, Lila darted forward, boots slipping in the mud, and plunged into the icy water. Jackson followed, strong and steady, but letting her take the lead. She grabbed the boy, wrapping her arms around him as the current tugged. Her muscles burned, but she refused to let go. Jackson reached her side, grasping her firmly, helping guide her and the boy safely to the bank. Gasping and soaked, Lila looked up at Jackson. The fire in his eyes mirrored her own adrenaline and relief. "You didn't hesitate," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "Not even for a second." She shook her head, chest heaving. "I couldn't. I had to." He stepped closer, wiping mud from her sleeve with rough hands, his touch lingering longer than necessary. "That's who you are," he said quietly. "Strong, brave, wild, but you're also caring and fierce and amazing." Layla felt her pulse quicken, the words wrapping around her heart like a spark setting dry, kindling a flame. She wanted to speak, to say something that would bridge the distance between admiration and something more. But her tongue refused. Instead, she let her eyes meet his, vulnerable and wide, unguarded. For the first time, she realized the depth of her feelings. It wasn't just trust or respect. It was something more, something that terrified her because it was so potent, so undeniable. Love. Jackson's gaze softened, his hand brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "You don't have to fight everything alone," he whispered. "Not here. Not with me." Her breath caught. That simple phrase, spoken so gently, broke down walls she hadn't even realized she'd built. She had survived on her own for so long, but now, maybe she didn't need to. The creek babbled around them, the sun glinting off the water, the ranch quiet beyond the hills. Lila leaned back slightly, heart pounding, and for the first time allowed herself to imagine a life not just of survival, but of shared strength, laughter, and love. And in that moment, the wild girl understood. She didn't need to be tamed. She only needed someone who could stand beside her, and Jackson was that person. Next few days passed in a rare kind of harmony. Lila's confidence on the ranch had grown, and Jackson's quiet presence had become a constant comfort. Yet, beneath the calm, something electric hummed between them, moments of lingering glances, brushes of hands, and a shared laughter that carried an intimacy neither had admitted aloud. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with shades of amber and rose, Jackson called Lila to help with the horses before nightfall. The northern pasture glowed under the fading light, and the air was still, almost expectant. "You've really got the touch with them," he said as she led a young mare back to the stable. "I think the ranch is starting to feel like home for you." Lila shrugged, trying to hide the flutter in her chest. "Maybe, but it's still yours." "I'm just visiting." Jackson stopped, his gaze locking onto hers. The air between them thickened, charged with unspoken words. "You're more than a visitor, Lila. You're part of this place." "Part of my life," he said, voice low but steady. Her breath caught. The words were heavier than any she had expected, an acknowledgement that she mattered, that she wasn't just the wild girl surviving at the edge of his world. She was essential, recognized, and wanted. As they finished securing the horses, Lila noticed the shadows lengthening across the field. "We should head in before it gets too dark," she suggested. Though neither of them moved immediately, Jackson stepped closer, subtly, as if closing the distance that had grown between them without force. "Lila," he began, his voice soft, "I've been trying to tell you something." She tilted her head, heart pounding, unsure whether she wanted to hear it or flee from the vulnerability she felt. He hesitated, then exhaled, a smile tugging at his lips. "I don't want you to change. I don't want you to be anything other than who you are. But I want you here, with me. Not just on the ranch, but with me." The world seemed to pause. Layla's eyes widened, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the dangerous, thrilling weight of her emotions. Jackson's words were not a command, not a demand. They were an invitation. A recognition. Her voice trembled slightly. I don't know if I can." "You can," he said firmly, yet tenderly, taking a step closer. You've survived storms, wild animals, danger, and fear. You can let yourself trust. And maybe love. Her chest tightened, the wind carrying the scent of earth and horses, the warmth of his presence enveloping her. She had fought for survival all her life, but Jackson offered something she had never known: safety without confinement, affection without demands, and freedom that didn't come with loneliness. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she reached out and touched his hand. It was rough, strong, grounding, and yet gentle in a way that made her pulse race. Jackson's thumb brushed over her knuckles, a silent acknowledgment of the bond they had forged. The first stars began to appear overhead, shimmering against the deepening night sky. Lila realized in that quiet moment that she had not only survived, but she had found a place where her fire was respected, where her wildness was cherished, and where her heart could finally begin to rest. Jackson's voice broke the silence, soft and intimate. "You've stepped into my heart, Layla. I hope you'll let me step into yours." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she didn't hesitate. A small, tentative smile curved her lips. "I think I might be ready." And as the night settled over the ranch, wild and free, two hearts, untamed and unbroken, found the first sparks of love, trust, and a future neither had dared to imagine before. The morning air was heavy with heat and the scent of dry grass. Lila moved quickly among the cattle, sweat beading on her forehead, her muscles aching from days of relentless work. The rhythm of ranch life had become almost comforting, but there was an unease in the back of her mind she couldn't shake. Something felt off. Jackson appeared from the barn, his expression tense. "We've got trouble," he said, voice low. His eyes scanned the horizon, sharp and calculating. Layla's heart skipped. "What kind of trouble?" "Bandits. They've been seen near the northern hills." "Could be after the cattle," he replied. The usual calm in his voice was replaced with urgency. "We need to secure everything and be ready." Lila's pulse quickened. Danger wasn't new to her. She had faced storms, animals, and strangers before. But this was different. This was real, present, and threatening the life she had begun to build here. Side by side with Jackson, together they moved swiftly. Jackson directed her to help secure the livestock while he patrolled the edges of the property. Her heart thudded not just from fear, but from the adrenaline and the shared tension between them. Every glance he threw her carried trust and unspoken communication. Hours passed with the constant vigilance of watchful eyes. Then, just as the sun dipped toward the horizon, she spotted movement, a shadow flitting along the ridgeline, too purposeful to be an animal. Her hand tightened on the rope she held, instinct screaming. Jackson joined her silently. "You see them?" he asked, voice low. Lila nodded. "Yes, they're coming closer." He didn't hesitate. "Stay behind me. But be ready." The bandits crested the ridge, shouting and waving crude weapons. Panic surged in the herd, and the ranch animals bolted, but Lila moved quickly, rallying the cattle with sharp, commanding calls she had learned to use. Jackson's eyes flicked to her, admiration evident even in the midst of chaos. One of the bandits lunged toward a stray calf, but Lila's rope lashed out, tripping him to the ground. The others paused, surprised by the audacity of the girl they had underestimated. Jackson moved like lightning, confronting the nearest men with strength and precision. His voice booming commands that demanded obedience. Side by side, they fought, not as master and property, but as equals. Layla's heart pounded as she dodged, tripped, and countered, relying on her agility and quick thinking. Jackson was her anchor, guiding and protecting, but never overshadowing her. Together, they were unstoppable. When the last bandit fled, battered and humiliated, Lila sank to her knees, trembling from exhaustion. Jackson knelt beside her, brushing mud and sweat from her hair. "You were incredible," he said softly. "I've never seen anyone handle themselves like that." Leela shook her head, breath ragged. I couldn't have done it without you." He smiled, his hand lingering on her shoulder. "No," he said. "You could have. But we did it together. That's the point. You're not alone anymore." For the first time, Lila allowed herself to feel the weight of what he meant. Danger had come, but it had also proven something vital: trust, partnership. And love didn't require submission, they required courage, respect, and a willingness to face the storm together. As the sun disappeared behind the hills, casting the ranch in shadow, Lila looked at Jackson and realized something she had never admitted. Her heart was no longer hers alone. It belonged, in part, to the man who had seen her fire and refused to extinguish it, and in that shared silence, with danger past and the ranch safe once more, she knew one undeniable truth: she had found her home, her protector, and the beginnings of a love that would never try to tame her, only stand beside her, wild and free. The dawn broke soft and golden, washing the ranch in light that made every blade of grass shimmer like glass. Lila stood on the porch, gazing across the fields, feeling the cool morning breeze brush her face. After the bandits' attack, the ranch had returned to its calm rhythm, but something inside her had shifted forever. She wasn't the wild girl running from life anymore. She had found a place, a purpose, and someone who could meet her fire without trying to cage it. Jackson emerged from the house, boots crunching on the gravel. He carried 2 cups of coffee, steam curling into the crisp morning air. He handed one to her, their fingers brushing. The spark that passed between them was undeniable, and for the first time neither flinched. "Morning," he said softly. "Sleep well?" Lila sipped her coffee, watching him, her heart fluttering. "I did. For the first time in a long time, I think I really did." Jackson smiled, eyes soft and warm. "Good. You deserve that." There was a quiet understanding between them now. A bond forged through storms, danger, trust, and countless shared moments. Lila felt it deep in her chest, the realization that she had finally found someone who would never ask her to change who she was, yet would always stand by her side. As they walked across the fields together, their shoulders brushing, Jackson stopped suddenly, looking out at the wide expanse of land. "You know," he said, voice low, "I never expected to find someone like you. Wild, fierce, untamed. And yet, you belong here. With me." Lila's breath caught. I think I belong here because you let me be myself," she admitted, voice soft but steady. "You never tried to tame me. You just saw me." Jackson stepped closer, his hand finding hers. "Exactly. I didn't want to tame you. I wanted you to see that you don't have to fight alone. And I wanted you to know that my heart is yours if you'll have it." Her pulse raced. This was more than words. It was a promise, a declaration of trust and love. She felt a warmth spread through her, a mix of relief, joy, and longing. She realized then that she had been waiting for this, not someone to tame her, but someone to meet her fire. "I think my heart's ready," she whispered, squeezing his hand. Jackson's smile deepened, and he closed the distance between them, brushing his forehead against hers. The world seemed to melt away, the fields, the ranch, the chores. All that mattered was this moment, this shared heartbeat. They stood there, side by side, wild and free, yet tethered by love, trust, and mutual respect. Lila no longer feared losing herself. She had found someone who could walk beside her without trying to dim her fire. Finally, Jackson leaned down, brushing his lips against hers in a gentle, affirming kiss. It was more than passion, it was respect, admiration, and the quiet understanding that 2 untamed souls could choose to belong to each other without compromise. When they pulled back, Layla's eyes sparkled, mirroring the dawn around them. I never thought I'd find someone who could see me, she admitted. And I never thought I'd find someone who could challenge me, inspire me, and love me the way you do, Jackson replied, voice steady and full of certainty. The sun climbed higher, warming the ranch and the two hearts that now beat as one. Lila looked across the fields, realizing that this place, the ranch, the land, the life, was more than survival. It was home. And beside her, Jackson's hand warm in hers, she finally understood. Being wild didn't mean being alone. Being untamed didn't mean unloved. She had found freedom, love, and a man who would stand beside her, heart to heart, fire to fire, forever. The wild girl had stepped into his heart, and he had stepped into hers. And together, they would face every sunrise, storm, and challenge as equals, partners, and something more, a love untamed, unbroken, and eternal.